Hello everyone. This video is part of a series created by the Career Development Practitioner Certification Board of Ontario to assist you with preparing your application for certification. This video will assist you with starting Section 7, Standards and Guidelines, and we will focus in this video just on the core competencies, which is the first part of Section 7. Then, in the next and final video in this series, we'll look at the specializations in Section 7, as well as Section 8, other related training. The sample application being used in this video can be found on the CDP-CBO website, along with other samples. In addition to viewing this sample, we encourage you to look at the other samples provided on the website to give you several different examples of what to write in this particular section. You may want to set aside several blocks of time to complete Section 7 on the Standards and Guidelines, as this is the longest section to prepare for the application. It does require extra time for thinking about and writing about your current and previous experience and matching that information up to the competencies in this section. There are 4 core competencies from the Canadian Standards and Guidelines for Career Development Practitioners that you will be addressing in Section 7. Professional behavior, interpersonal competence, career development knowledge, and needs assessment and referral. Switching now to look at the actual application, and you can see here that this is Section 7, Standards and Guidelines Competencies. In this section, you will describe how your work experience and skills match the competencies outlined in the Canadian Standards and Guidelines for Career Development Practitioners. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit and show you on this first page in this section this chart of competencies. So you can see all of this laid out in chart form. This is taken from the Canadian Standards and Guidelines for Career Development Practitioners. The additional columns that you see, T, W, and O, stand for training, work experience, and other, and those were added for the purpose of this section. If you look at the headings across the top, you can see that it's referring to the cluster or the core competency, professional behavior being the first one that I just showed you, and then the functions that take place within each of those competencies, and then you see a more detailed breakdown of subcompetencies within each section. See within this section, we've got core competency number 1, core competency number 2 with the detailed subcompetencies, core competency number 3 with the detailed subcompetencies, and then core competency number 4. So you're going to be addressing each of these areas in turn, and you can see underneath each one there's an evidence section. This is where you're going to be writing about and describing your previous experience. One thing to be aware of is that the competency framework was updated and re-released in 2022. The certification process through CDP-CBO was created using the original standards and guidelines which you see in this document. We will continue to use this framework until we no longer offer certifications once the new national credential is implemented. Being certified under these pre-existing standards and guidelines still provides a valid credential that will be recognized under the new national certification. Before beginning to work on this section, it would be helpful for you to review the 4 competencies that I've just scrolled through and the subcompetencies that appear under each section to familiarize yourself with the types of points you'll need to address in writing about your competencies and later on your specializations. Once you have reviewed the core competencies, we suggest that you have this document open on your computer when writing about how you demonstrate the competencies and subcompetencies, so you can even use some of the language of the more detailed sections to show your use of the competencies. While you don't have to reflect every single thing from the detailed descriptions, the assessors reviewing your application do expect to see quite a lot of detail, enough to give you a clear idea of how you demonstrate the competencies in your work. So again, for the purpose of the application, in this section, you're going to describe how your skills and experience meet all 4 of the core competencies. Let's look now at a sample of how these sections can be written. The example that I'm going to show you here reflects an application that we would consider to be well written and very complete. And you may have more or less to write in some sections, but this example gives you an idea of what we're looking for when we assess applications. This is the sample application, which looks exactly like the blank application I was just showing you, but now you will see that it is filled in. So one of the things you're going to do first in this section is for each of the core competencies, you may have developed your skills in these areas through training and or work experience and or perhaps other types of experience such as volunteer work. If you look at the top of the column where the core competencies begin in this sample, you'll see that you can check off under each of the headings, training, work experience, or other, to indicate how you gained each core competency. So what you're going to do here is to provide the check marks at the beginning of each section. Then in the empty evidence box below that, you are going to insert descriptions of how you gained each competency through training, work experience, or other. One thing that we need to note here is that it's not sufficient to simply attach your resume and say, see attached resume in the evidence section. We need you to identify and describe what skills and experience you have developed that specifically meet each core competency. So you're going to indicate clearly within each of these categories where you gained each of these subcompetencies, training, work, or other. As you can see here, the first for competency, professional behavior, has 4 subcategories. Adhere to the code of ethics and the ethical decision-making model. Let me just make that a little bit bigger on the screen for you. The second one in this category is demonstrate a commitment to professional development. Third, use analytical skills. And 4, manage work. To the right of each subcategory is a more detailed breakdown of the description of each competency. So next to these detailed points, you're going to check where you developed each of these skills. And note that you can check more than one category for each one. So on this sample application form for the first competency of professional behavior, in the subcategory of adhering to the code of ethics and the ethical decision-making model, you can see that this applicant has indicated for this first point of following the code of ethics and applying the ethical decision-making model that they gained this competency through both training and work. And this applicant has indicated the same for the second point in this category. When we look at the next point in this section, demonstrate a commitment to professional development, we can see that for all of the points under this heading, this applicant has indicated these skills were all gained through work. So for all of the points listed under each competency, we will first simply go through the chart and put check marks under the appropriate columns to indicate how you developed your competency in each of these areas. Once you have put your check marks in the appropriate boxes at the top of each competency section, you'll see a chart just like this at the beginning of each of the 4 competencies. Then you need to provide some detailed written description of how you developed each of these competencies and how you demonstrate them in your work. You'll insert this information in the evidence section underneath each chart where you have checked off the columns. So for competencies that you have obtained through training, you will just indicate that you did a training course, preferably giving the date completed, and you would also have to provide documentation in Section 8 to verify that you did the training, and that will be covered in the next video. And then you also need to describe how you apply in your day-to-day work any competencies that were obtained through training. For competencies obtained through work experience or other means, you'll briefly describe when and how you've demonstrated this competency through your work experience. In looking at this example here, you can see in the detail that this individual has written concise but fairly thorough explanations for each of the points in this first competency. And so let's have a look at what she wrote here for this very first one, adhere to the code of ethics and the ethical decision-making model. Again, this is under one of the 4 core competencies, professional behavior. So I'm just going to read this first section. I won't be doing this with every single section on this sample, but just to show you how you can write about your own experience within each of these sections. So if we look at this section right here, we can see that she has written, "Knowing and following strong ethical principles has always been important to me. I first learned the principles of ethics while attending university. I completed an ethics course, which began the building block to my decision-making process. More recently, I was able to complete the Career Development Ethics course, which provided industry-specific knowledge on how to best demonstrate these principles with clients. As a facilitator of the Youth Job Connection YJC program, it has been my duty to teach ethics and employment standards to the youth in my program. Over the years of facilitating, I have come to see the importance in this information and how valuable this knowledge is to youth starting out in the workplace. Finally, one of the most effective ways that I've learned about ethics has been through more experienced colleagues and managers in my field. I've been lucky to have had some excellent mentors through my career who've had an open-door policy for questions. Because of this, I've always felt open to discuss ethical dilemmas and how to best handle them. This has allowed for me to be more confident in my decisions with regards to professional ethics. So, of course, you would be writing in your own words about your own experience. This is really not, a lot of words and not a lot of writing that you have to do, but you can see that this individual has really described very nicely and concisely the things that they've done in the job that fit with this particular subcompetency. And then you can see as we scroll down that this individual has addressed, if I just go back up for a second, this individual has addressed all of these points through this section. So I'm not going to go through them all, but just to show you, that each one is, a couple of paragraphs, one good thorough paragraph for each section would give you a good beginning. You don't need to write, pages and pages on each of these. And there may be some cases where some of the same information can be used in more than one section to validate a particular competency. Thing I would like to point out here and request that you do, as it really makes it much easier for us to review your application, is to really list the section numbers as this individual has done, so we can easily see the descriptions matched up to each competency and each subcategory. So while these competency description sections do not need to be terribly lengthy, you will need to put sufficient detail and put some thought into what you want to write for each one. So this is the reason that we say this section will likely take the longest to do on your application, and that you may need to schedule several sections to work on your application in this section. So you will need to complete this step for all four of the core competencies. And I will just scroll down and show you. So this is all just on competency 1. Again, you may write less than this. And then you can see this individual went on to competency 2, again, checked off in the columns, and then wrote some description underneath to correspond with each of the subcompetencies. Because it might take you some time to get through writing about each of these, you might find it helpful to break it up into separate sections, perhaps focusing in 1 week on one specific competency, or picking one subsection within each competency to write about every day or every other day. Some people may be able to do a lot of writing in this section in one sitting, while other people might need to spread it out a bit more. It can be particularly helpful to work with colleagues who are also preparing their application and to talk through the different competencies, as it may help you to identify examples more easily to illustrate each competency. So that is the sample that you can look at when you are writing this section. And again, this is available on the CDP CBO website. Once you have finished writing your evidence to support the core competencies, next you'll be looking at the specializations, which will be covered in the next video. In that video, I will then be reviewing the remainder of Section 7, the specializations, as well as other training. As I've mentioned, you will likely find this section on core competencies to be the most labor-intensive, but once you get this section completed, you will probably find the remaining work to not be as labor-intensive, and you will be in the final home stretch. After completing this section, you will likely find that the specializations are a bit easier to write about, and they don't require quite as much detail. So the finish line is in sight. Do keep your momentum going. Remember to consult the sample applications on the website if you have any questions. And of course, feel free to contact us at any time as you're in the process of doing your application if you have questions that are not clarified by the sample application. Thanks for watching, and again, don't hesitate to contact us at any time with questions.